Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today we are talking mental health as I am joined by mental health coach Dale Walsh. Dale is a coach for families of people who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Dale has been a coach for years, and he has developed the Live Love method for the families and the people who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. So we're going to be talking to him about his method and why he's so passionate and everything that he's up to. So Dale, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Glad to have you. Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, if you don't mind, I sort of have I'm a poet. I actually have an archive of 5,000 poems, and I have one that I usually use as a sort of an introduction, just to let people know what happened, and rather than explaining in 5 minutes, I think this does it in one. If
go
I
right ahead.
Have the liberty.
Absolutely.
It's called Dale Reviewing What Actually Happened, and it goes like this. Hi, I'm God was a joke I made after killer Dartmouth toke of some primo Ivy League smoke, which apparently caused me to croak because in mental hospital I awoke, with roommate Gabriel, the main bloke who did my delusions angelically stroke, while the doctor claimed my brain broke the moment divine gag I spoke, testifying I was only bit quack, which clinicians diagnosed a psychotic attack, preventing me from getting sanity back until I came to Teaneck Hackensack to pursue rest and therapy program track and deal with my evident lack of reason among psychiatric patient back who never gave me any slack. Under interrogation, the story didn't crack.
That was absolutely beautiful. I love that. For listeners who might not be aware of what schizophrenia actually is, I know we hear about it, but explain what schizophrenia is and why it's such a problem.
Well, schizophrenia, according to the textbooks, is a brain illness that's many think is a result of a chemical imbalance in the brain, where you have hallucinations, delusion. There are two things. There's positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Positive symptoms are things that are added to a person's reality, such as hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, incoherent speaking and stuff. And the negative symptoms are like withdrawal, social anxiety, depression, withdrawal, and basically, doctors go on about the symptomology, and to tell you the truth, Curveball, I never had I'm a pretty rare schizophrenic because I never had a hallucination in my life, even when I was doing LSD. My whole problem was delusions. So, that notwithstanding, just from my own lived experience, I've come up with a definition of schizophrenia that I think basically sums up the illness very concisely and is a lot easier to understand than the jargon that doctors and therapists use. And that definition is: a schizophrenic is living in a reality that was not conceived on Earth.
Okay. Well, I know that you recovered from schizophrenia, or, you can let us know if you feel like that you fully recovered or you're still in recovery. But what does, for those who might not know or might have somebody recovering or trying to recover from schizophrenia, what does recovery from schizophrenia look like?
Well, I, when basically what I say about using that definition of schizophrenia I just used, which is living in a reality that's not conceived on Earth. To me, a recovered schizophrenic is something I call a genius, and that's someone who has integrated his or her reality into that of the general culture or the matrix. So basically, uh, when you first get schizophrenia and until you get to reach a certain point in recovery, you're going to be basically exiled from a society, and I this is a I'm not saying this as a judgment. This just seems to be what happened. I went in and out of the hospital 15 times, Curveball. So, I basically was like a outsider, even though I was like living by myself for, from 1981 on. I began by being hospitalized for 13 weeks, and then I came to a psychiatric program, which I said in my poem, for 5.5 years, where I was given intensive therapy for three times a week, group therapy twice a week, and basically I was basically forced into therapy, but um, and that's one of the reasons why I feel I've been so successful in my recovery. But recovery from schizophrenia basically means being free as a hospital, being hopefully on your own or at least in some sort of like independent living situation, even if it's a supervised apartment or something. But when I was in the hospital, my first hospital, I said to my doctor, I said, "Why am I here?" And he said, "Well, if you broke your leg, Dale, you'd come to the hospital." And I said yes, and he said, "Well, you broke your brain." And for the longest time, this was back in 1975, but for the longest time, even up to probably like 15 years ago, uh, schizophrenia was basically a death sentence. It was like a life sentence of like hopelessness because people said that you broke your brain and there was nothing you could do, and the most you could ever hope to do is cope and and live by yourself and stuff. There was no hope for like marriage or even college. I mean, I'm a college graduate. I graduated with honors from Fairleigh Dickinson University. But the stereotypical idea of a schizophrenic is they're just going to be a babbling idiot for the rest of their lives, and that's obviously not true. But fact is that to recover from schizophrenia takes a great will, self awareness, and self determination because it is a bitch of an illness.
Well, tell us about your live love method and kind of explain how you came up with that and how you use that to help your clients, their families.
Oh, okay. Well, Live Love was basically, I feel was basically a download from the Lord because it just came to me in a flash of genius. And Live Love is an anagram, which is live Love stands for learn, integrate, validate, explore, and then listen, observe, value, and express. And this is the 8-step method, 8-step program I take my clients through. My coaching, my mentoring is devoted to not only helping people, communicate better with their loved ones, and to have an ongoing dialogue about the challenges they face on a daily, more long-term situation. But it's also, more importantly, it's to help them reclaim or at least achieve a self-integrity that many of them lose in the caregiving process just because schizophrenia can be so consuming not only to the to the patient, but also to the caregivers that a lot of times caregivers become codependent on their loved ones and find their whole meaning in life, taking care of their loved ones. And so what I try to do in my Live Love program is like help them to come to a realization not only of how to better communicate with their loved ones and give them tools to understand. Most, one of my main purposes is just to tell them about what the illness is. The symptomology, there are going to be delusions, hallucinations, organized thought, and how to communicate with their loved ones. And ultimately just, but, more importantly is to be able to get back their own mental health away from the codependency and the sort of like pathology that they might assume taking care of their loved one, and also improve their family relationships with the other people who are not affected by the illness in their family, because that's another big factor. Is when someone gets schizophrenia, it can be it usually is extremely disruptive to the whole family, and not only do siblings become jealous that their parents are paying so much attention to the loved ones, but it's just like this: the loved one himself, him or herself, can cause a lot of conflict, and so it does put strains on marriages and family relationships. So that's something else that I help people with. But the Live Love program, I feel, is like a general therapeutic method that could be generally adopted in a lot of ways, not just in psychiatry.
Okay, well, in your experience doing your Live Love program, what is the biggest challenge that you see your clients face?
I would say the biggest challenge is, well, there are a couple. One is not getting frustrated and treating their loved one with compassion. I say there are four things: faith, love, hope, and patience. Those are four qualities that I think every caregiver has to have, because one thing that I emphasize at the very beginning is mental illness is not a 2-week cold. It's not going to go away in 2 weeks. It's going to be a lifelong fight to get your loved one. And one challenge that people seem to don't really think about is that when someone gets schizophrenia, their personality usually, their identity completely transforms. And so the caregivers are sort of left in a position where they're mourning the loved one, the death of the loved one that they knew, and they are very reluctant, just because it can be very difficult to communicate with. They're very reluctant to get to know the new person their loved one has become. And there's a lot of grief that can go on, and of course there's shame and guilt, because people feel guilty and shame. They feel shame for having a loved one with schizophrenia, and they feel guilt because they feel it's their fault that the schizophrenia came at all. And that's something that I really work on helping people get over, because it doesn't serve any purpose. And ultimately, there's something called agnosognosia, which is another big obstacle, and that very few people know about. But it's something that I basically, in the first session, the learn session, I make sure that they understand, or at least have the concept. And agnosognosia is a concept taken from neurology for stroke victims. That means the patient is unable to comprehend that there's anything wrong with their brain. So the analogy I've come to use about this is if you go up to a blind person and you put a book in front of him and say, read it, he's obviously not going to be able to read it because he can't see it. And agnosignosis were the same thing with mental illness. The people that have agnosignosia, which affects as many as 60% of people with serious mental illness, can't understand that they have a mental illness, and therefore they're going to be very reluctant to take drugs, medications that they that make them feel terrible and they feel are unnecessary, and also makes getting them into therapy very difficult.
Well, speaking of medication, how important is medication to recovery, and is it a lifelong thing or temporary or what?
Well, I really feel that without medication, I wouldn't I wouldn't be here today. Whether I be dead or in some long term uh, institution in the back ward of some state mental hospital, because just people who don't uh, experience schizophrenia, say, from the outside, they say it's a horrible drug and nobody should have to take it. But, as I said, I was hospitalized 15 times, Curveball, and probably about 10 of those times was because I stopped taking my medication. Because as soon as I stopped taking my medication, my symptoms would return, and I would be in the hospital within 2 days to 2 weeks. And actually, the last time I was in the hospital in 2025 was because I admitted myself, because I was self-aware enough to know I was psychotic, and it was because one of my medications stopped working. So I went into the hospital, got on new medication and everything, and I was out within 5 days. But I can't overstress the importance, at least in my case, and I'll be on medication my whole life. But I mean, someone with diabetes is going to be on insulin probably most of all their life too. And there are a lot of physical illnesses where, I mean, even say just blood pressure. If you have blood pressure, it's recommended you take medication, and however long it takes. And of course, it is possible to get off the medications. In fact, I've tried traded down. I was on like 30 milligrams of my antipsychotic for 40 years, and in the last 10 years, I've gone from 30 milligrams to 10 milligrams a day. And I feel great, and but medication, I just from my own experience, I get very wary, because people used to say to me, "There's nothing wrong with you, Dale. You're the most normal person I've ever seen. You're the sanest person I've ever known." I'd say two things. One is you must have known some pretty crazy people then, and secondly, I'd say see me without my medication and tell me I'm sane. And so medication to me has been an essential foundation of my recovery.
Well, for those diagnosed with schizophrenia, what are the dangers of drug and alcohol use?
Uh, well, a lot of people say, and a lot of people say that when I was at Dartmouth, before I had my first break, I had a very successful freshman year at Dartmouth academically, but I was also doing major marijuana every day, and also doing a lot of hallucinogenics like LSD, mescaline, and mushrooms, and psilocybin. And so my mother had a diagnosis, was herself mentally ill, and I feel that, looking back, I feel that maybe if I'd just taken the marijuana, that I would have been okay, and that's basically what a lot of doctors have told me. But the fact is that the hallucinogenics tipped me over the point to psychosis, and so, and when I got to the program, as I said, I was in a program for 5.5 years, and I was smoking marijuana every day. I would go down the hill to the projects, and buy like 2 or 3 joints every night. And so um, my doctor always said, he ended up saying that marijuana was my nemesis because he said every time I escalated my use of marijuana, I'd go to the hospital, which was true for a while. But actually, Curveball, from I was smoking marijuana every day until the age of 52. So basically, I had like 35 years where I was smoking marijuana every day. And after a while, I got so used to marijuana that it wasn't having that deleterious an effect on my mental health. But but for a long time, especially if I stopped smoking marijuana and then I would go back and smoke a joint, I'd be almost immediately in the hospital almost every time. So, people think that self medication is good, and I mean, marijuana is. I'm not going to put down marijuana because I don't want to be a hypocrite because I did love it for 35 years and I did give it up abruptly cold turkey in 2007. So I've been straight sane and sober since 20 October 2007. But it does have even if it's not a primary agent of psychosis, it does have a complicating effect on the whole process of recovery. And it's probably, I think one of the reasons why I didn't make as much progress as I did for a long time is just because my progress was being slowed down by my constant use of marijuana and beer.
We'll talk about psychotic anger. Explain what psychotic anger is and how people with schizophrenia deal with psychotic anger.
Well, that's a very good question, and I, uh, I, I'll give a practical example of psychotic anger. So, uh, I mentioned agnosognosia, and basically, I was in agnosognosia for the first 10 years of my therapy until one day in September of 1984, I had a vision of the whole entire Earth being incinerated in a thermonuclear holocaust. And I called that the death of Dale. Basically, I feel that some agency, I'm not sure who, basically blew up my brain. People say drugs blow your mind. My brain literally blew up. And I called that the death of Dale. And I feel that was recovery began because not only did I see how sick I had been saying I was God for 10 years, but I also felt that in that implosion, Dale's whole basic personality was blown away, was blown out, including the delusions, including the schizophrenia and everything. And I became Dewey, who is my alter ego. But the pain of losing Dale was so great to me that I would react extremely angrily, almost madly, whenever anybody called me Dale, and I'd say, "I'm not Dale, I'm Dewey." And people love Dale. I mean, Dale was a very good guy, and Dale is a very good guy. Basically Dale's back now, but Dale was a very good guy, and people were like taken back, and they couldn't like make the transition from Dale to Dewey as I was being forced to. So after the death of Dale, I went into the hospital 3 days later, and I was I was in the hospital, and I'm getting this is the point of psychotic anger. So I was passing a staff member in the hall, and he said, "Hi, Dale," and I just turned on him. I started yelling at the top of my voice. I said, "I'm not Dale, I'm Dewey," and basically he's saying, "Calm down, Dale." And of course, every time he says Dale, I'm getting more and more angry, and it was a furious rage. So within within 15 seconds, I was surrounded by 5 security guards, and they pulled me away from the staff member and told me to go to my room. And so, long story short, they said, you just bought yourself a ticket out of here. So I was afraid they were going to send me to Bergen Pines, which was the notorious county hospital. This was in Hackensack Hospital. And they said, you just bought yourself a ticket out of here. But luckily, nothing came. I stayed in Hackensack and everything. But I was just like so full of rage that, it was like unbelievable. And, this is and it has to do with paranoia too, Curveball, because, the paranoia comes and, you can't see reality when you're paranoid. And therefore, you're living in a world of delusion and paranoia. And, this is something that I talk about a lot is, I think it's very unfair that every time there's a mass shooter, that people immediately say, what's his diagnosis? Or he must have mental illness and everything, because people can be filled with hate, whether they're whether they have a diagnosis or not. But the fact is, it's 50% more likely that a person with serious mental illness will have violence perpetrated against himself rather than do violence himself. So that's just something that people need to keep in mind. But that's just an example. I very rarely experience psychotic rage. My doctor said my illness was psychotic bliss. So I would just like lose reality being too happy most of the time.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
So for the caregivers of someone with schizophrenia, what should they do if the family member refuses treatment?
Well, you can't really force them. It's one thing apropos of that, I think is more important at first to consider what should you do if your loved one, if your family member goes psychotic. And I think it's very important to be prepared for something like that. And, have like agencies that you're going to call, whether it's the police or the mental health group in your area or something. But it's a catch-22 because you can't force people to get treatment until they go psychotic, but once they go psychotic, then they're a danger to themselves. So, the other thing is, you can't be committed to in a hospital unless you're a danger to yourself or to others, and that's up to the interpretation of the courts. So, in answer to your question, what can you do if they refuse treatment? You just have to have patience, and some people I know would sort of sneak the medication into their food, and not tell them and everything. I think that's where sneaking might be necessary, but it's ultimately it's a matter of responding, not reacting, and also developing listening skills. Because instead of just like getting frustrated that they're refusing to see a doctor, refusing to take their medication, it's much more a matter of like engaging them in conversation and helping them down, just coming to see their point of view. Because the more dialogue you have, the more communication there is, the more empathetic you can be, and therefore the more you can understand how to neutralize their objections.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Well, my as I said, I'm a poet. I have an archive of 5,000 poems. So I have I want to like put out one or two books. I have 5 books on Amazon, and I want to publish one or two more within the next year. And I also have a memoir which I wrote, which is called "Escape from the Ivy League." And that's the story of what happened to me at Dartmouth about my first great psychotic break. And so I'm thinking about publishing that on KDP, on self-publishing on Amazon. And basically, I'm just like I'm trying to find. I'm working on building my business and helping people. You know, get over the fear of exposing themselves and telling me, coming to me and saying, I have this problem. Say my son is a schizophrenic and I don't know how to handle it. And I actually have a Calendly link. It's at www.calendly.com/DaleCoach55, where you can make an appointment for a 45-minute free consultation. And so basically, I'm just trying to figure out ways, Curtis, of how to get people to come out of the shell of their shame and guilt and get in touch with me.
All right. Well, close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Well, it's one of hope. Self-awareness is like extremely important to recovery from any mental illness. And one thing people have to know about is agnosia. And there's a great book called "I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help" by this doctor, Dr. Xavier Amador, Amador. And it's the story of his relationship with his brother who had schizophrenia and had agnosia for basically 17 years, and how he developed a good dialogue and basically, rebuilt the bridges of relationship with his brother. And so I guess the most important thing I can say is don't lose hope. As I said, the 4 things: love, hope, faith, and patience, I think, are essential components of not only understanding and being a successful caregiver, but it's also a central part of a recovery for the person who's going through the illness. And so that's about it. It took me basically 15 years to. I talked about the deaths of Dale, but it really took me about 20 years to get out of my delusions. And I guess that's one last thing I'd say is that if someone you have, has delusions, then don't think that it's just like a matter of like 1 or 2 bad thoughts or faulty thoughts they have, because delusion goes much deeper than that. A delusion is a structure at the very foundation of a person's identity. And that's why it took that thermonuclear hit in my head to knock me out of my delusions. And although that might seem extreme. The fact is that, it's an ongoing process to get through to someone who is seriously mentally ill. And therefore, you have to just take small steps and celebrate little wins. And sometimes, you can bribe people. One thing, if people don't want to take their medication, for instance, or another thing that happens is self-care. People stop taking showers and everything. So don't be above a little briberies. If your loved one smokes and he's not taking his medication or he's not taking a shower, then make a deal with him. Say, okay, I'll buy you cigarettes for the next 3 days if you take your medication and take a shower. And it doesn't even have to be cigarettes. You can do it with his favorite meal. Say, I'll reward you with with lasagna, which is your favorite dish, if you'll take your medication for the next 2 days. And tracking is also very important. If someone is reluctant to take medication, then try to keep track of what they're doing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you or somebody you know is dealing with schizophrenia, get with Dale. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Jump on your favorite podcast app. Follow, check out the show, share it, review it. If you have any guest or suggestion topics or feedback for the show, Curtis Jackson 1978 at att.net is the place to send them. Thank you for listening and supporting the show.
Could I say one last thing?
Yes, sir.
My website is www.dewlivelove.net. Thank you, Curtis.
All right. And thank you for joining us. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.